All right, good afternoon, everyone, and lovely, cool, breezy, overcast little day here in the Cape, in Winelands. And we're going to try and cover most of the big ticket items affecting the Western Cape for the past week. Unfortunately, a day late, but life has gotten in the way. I have one particular story that I want to run off on the top, which is not related to South Africa directly, but it's very interesting. And that is in Japan. So in Japan, we are having they've started initiating a migrant program with sort of economic partnerships with the with various southern African states, including Mozambique and Zambia and so on. And one of the most interesting things that they're doing is that each of these countries that they are doing doing some kind of labor sharing agreement with. They've designated for each of them a hometown which the migrants are going to go to. So, like Mozambique gets one town and Zambia gets another and so on. And I thought it very interesting because, if you know where I come from, I make a lot of these comparisons, like global Southafricanization and so on. But it seems that Japan is taking an extremely close path to the one that we've taken in the, end of the 19th century, you get the consolidation of the Union. You've got all of these like nice white settlements, like tidy white settlements that have relatively little migrant labor as a proportion. But going into the Union, you're having the use of poll taxes and economic pressures to induce labor towards these metropoles, and then the conflict with the local white population heats up. And in order to mitigate those political problems after the Rand Rebellion in 1922, you get a populist government from 1924, and the populist government increases segregation in the cities and introduces a color bar on the labor side in order to placate the how should I put them, white nativists. It feels funny to say that in a South African context, but apparently a nasty popping on my mic. Is that better? I don't know. Mr. Ben Alberts has let me know. But at any rate, so the Japanese are taking the position that there's a lot of pushback, and they've seen Sanseito, the right-wing party that they've got, that big orange party, the guy with the nice gelled hair. That looks like he comes out of like an early 2000s boy band. But he's running a fairly right-wing party that sort of wants to...
The Backstreet Boys, dude.
Yeah, something like that. He wants to revive the Japanese military. He wants to kick all the foreigners out, all that. I mean, stuff that seems, in the context of what the West has done to itself. I mean, look, the UK, all new births this year, only 54% are British. So it's kind of over for them. And
also in the UK, I don't know when it was done, but the name Muhammad is amongst the top ranking of newborn kids.
I don't know, that kind of stuff's been around for a while now. I think sort of Japan at the time when it's like obviously everyone recognizes this is a bad move. The macroeconomic indicators are actually not positive. Bringing in migrants is a net drain on the fiscus, a net drain on the private economy. All of these things have been recognized, the social cleavages. And the Japanese have already had problems with this minuscule Kurdish community that they've got compared to the West. I think the standout thing about the Japanese is that because there's a very homogenous, high-trust society that functions really well, the second you have people disrupting it, it's extremely noticeable. And it was noticeable for the West even 30, 40 years ago when we had the populations were tiny, but the policing of the discourse has been better. In Japan, it's not the same. Japan still has very should we say, robust conservative voices in the mainstream. So what's happening now, it's interesting because I had a poke around the policy documents, and it seems this was in the cards from around 2003, and that's how long it's taken them to get this stuff passed in Japan. That's how resilient and slow moving they are. At the moment, I'm sort of getting very interested in Japan, so there's like a couple of new books on my reading list, like Princes of the Yen, which I'm looking forward to. It's about, late 80s, early 90s central bank politics relating to Japan and how they used sort of nasty bits of monetary policy pressure to reform the Japanese society and deindustrialize it. So this was like a plan that they imposed, and they imposed the argument, which I'm going to have to read and see if it holds any water, is that they basically crushed Japan's economy through monetary restrictions in order to induce a financialization and servicization of the economy, which then further, and then you have to do these kind of open border stuff to cope and save in core strategic industries. So it's a very, very, a very conspiratorial take, but we'll see.
And from your understanding of what's happening there, do you think that that's related to the demographics? So in other words, the low birth rates, because it's quite well documented that Japan has had very low birth rates for a very long time. Same with South Korea. When I lived in South Korea, they would pay you to have children. Like my wife gave birth to my first son there. They literally gave us a whole bunch of money to have a child. So,
Really? Well, I mean, that's interesting. But I mean, if you look at the timeline of it, it's I had a poke around, and there's a very interesting thing when you get like natural population increase. It starts a precipitous decline in the early 70s, and not just in Japan, but across the West. And it's very interesting. Very interesting that it correlates with America's default on its debt through the introduction of fiat currency and the oil crisis. So the shift from gold to oil-backed global finance seems to have made a kind of economic restructuring that really, really had a big impact on a lot of people. I mean, it's because, look, feminism has been around since, the end of World War II as a factor, female workforce participation as well. But then you get this tipping point where it just goes goes down, down, down. And Japan only entered negative effective population growth in, I think, 2004, 2005. So it's not actually as old as you'd think. And I mean, look, my understanding of these factors is that one of the big drivers is credit. So if you have easily available credit and you have a high inflation economy, it's not growing very much. Of course, Japan's very different, and I don't want to get too deep into Japan because they're very weird. But there's one thing that's certainly true of the rest of the economy, which is that if you're doing quantitative easing and stuff, then you get this problem, which, I mean, the West has been doing for a while now, and you don't have any sort of easy growth avenues. You start pouring money into fixed assets, land and property and so on. For like a generation, property is just going linearly upwards. And I mean, the consequence of this, it makes it harder and harder to get into the property rung, and it makes it harder to have a family and whatever. And one of the most interesting things you find looking at demographic studies of Europe is that the areas where the population is actually the densest living. So like you'll get, and particularly in terms of like you'll get small high-rise apartments and so on. There you'll find the birth rate is the lowest because no one thinks they can raise a family in a one-bedroom apartment. So they just don't do it. I think that, your property price inflation as a hedge against, a lack of really ebullient growth in industry and so on is likely a driver. So you want to reduce the money supply and sort of correct things. And I mean, that's possibly a decent segue into what's happening now, because you've got the South African Revenue Bank is having a little pivot at the moment. So they've set their inflation target. I mean, it seems that they've set this target, prior to now, but because we're very close to the target. But they want to set the new permanent target not at like 4.5%, but at 3%. So they've been revising over the past decade or so. They've been revising the inflation rate down. But the recent revision, I mean, it means that you're restricting credit. Now, that's good for a number of reasons in the long term. But in the short term, what it's doing is you're going to make it harder you're increasing the pressure on the government due to its that comes from its own debt servicing costs. So that makes it a bit of a problem. It's the rand's got better purchasing power for imports, so cost of imports is going to go down, and so on. And it's nice not to have inflation. I think it's nice not to have inflation, but there are some sort of systemic consequences for this, and I do wonder, because central banks are not directly controlled by government. They really aren't. They're kind of independent, and they have this sort of centrally coordinated plan that's run by the Bank of International Settlements that, whether dictates is the right word, heavily influences their policies. And
so do you think that there's something else going on there?
I mean, look, I don't know. It could be that it's about harmonizing global financial policies, because that's always going on. I mean, right now, the G20, you've had France talking about, how they want to step in and help South Africa harmonize and join global governance a bit better and so on. I mean, although this wasn't the only source that this was reported on was in that Moroccan paper, Al Andalus or whatever it is. And it's like, what? It's like not even in the French media, and it's not in South African media, but it's on a Moroccan paper. So I got that on my little news feed. I don't know how, but it's an interesting remark, because we're very big on global governance here. But you got Leon Schreiber and whatever running around trying to privatize, condense the private banks and the Department of Home Affairs so that they're basically working in an indistinguishable and inseparable way. I don't like it. But I can tell you, Mr. Man over there, Michiel Leroux, is probably thinking his donations to the DA over the past 15 years have paid off. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I don't like global governance. I think, like every country is completely different. And the idea that we all need to be governed by a central planning office somewhere in, New York or Basel or wherever the hell the policy is being set is a ludicrous idea. Absolutely ludicrous. Even if you assume that there are no cultural differences between any groups of people anywhere in the world, still economic circumstances are bloody different.
No, sure. And I think though that reality meets ideology. The reality very often works itself out in that things crack and things crumble. And even though there are ideologues trying to push things in a certain way to reshape the world, to reshape society, I always do find comfort in the fact that we are tribal. We all love our groups, and that's the reality.
See, that doesn't comfort me. Do you know why it doesn't comfort me? Because we're also bloody lazy, and so it's very, very easy It's very easy to steer these sort of vapid senses of group belonging one way or the other. I mean, if the government was really if the government's really threatened, or the system of government is really threatened, they can do something about it. I think that it's it would be easier if we were all the same. It would be easier if we had the same aspirations. Then global government would be a great idea. Unfortunately,
Yes.
we live in a world where we have group
Yes.
differences, and we have this huge drive to global governance that's been going on for the past 100 years or whatever, and to varying degrees. But I don't know.
Do you think that we've always been lazy, or do you think that with the rise of screens, phones, instant stuff, that it's sort of made it worse? We have become lazier and lazier as things have gone on, perhaps 200 years ago, 300 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution. I wonder if we were as lazy.
But it's like it's been a double-edged sword. So like on the one hand, it's easier to feel like you've done something and then retire without doing anything. But on the other hand, you can find so much more about what's going on by online. You can it's so easy to find policies, to find history papers, to find statistics. Learning about your environment is very, very easy nowadays. So I think it sort of cuts both ways. There's things that have gone up and things that have gone down. One of the big is lack of social cohesion, but then that's something that cuts both as well. I mean, the high social cohesion in the West allowed World Wars I and II to function as absolute slaughterhouses. I mean, can you imagine if those societies were as fractious as, say, the Austro-Hungarian Empire? And imagine every side was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. What would that look like? It wouldn't go very far.
No, and that's why there was one philosopher who made a comment about South Africa being a place where the very best never happens and the very worst never happens. Who was it who said that? I don't know if you know that.
No, that's nuts.
And I think is that? Oh no,
yeah, that's nuts. Yeah, but no, I mean it's not. I think. But I think the thing is more just like you have. If you have low social trust and you have a difficulty sort of forming any kind of unity, it's also difficult for the governing elites
really bad
a lot. So I think that's partially why South Africa doesn't work, is that you've got you've got a lot of these subunits that are sort of like doing their own thing off in the corner for various reasons. But
which then segues into what has been happening in the Democratic Alliance and various municipalities in the Cape.
Yeah, no, that's something I picked up, which is very funny. So it's like these marginal news stories. So like no one really pays attention to municipal politics for some reason, but it's very interesting because that's where all of the really sexy, easy to find corruption stories are happening in like Garden Route or Hessequa or whatever. And one of the things that happened recently is in the last couple of months, they've had 2 municipalities where DA members have rebelled against the DA and voted for an ANC mayor. And I mean, this for me is crazy. So I mean, like for my money, it's quite possible that this is due to local dynamics. But I have the suspicion that it's a knock-on effect of certain policies the DA has taken to their local by-election strategies. So you got to remember about a year ago, and leading into the national elections last year for about a year, there was this high tension between the Cape branch of the Vryheidsfront and the DA. And this is over local corruption issues. Started out in Oudtshoorn. So they had this thing where they said, listen, you guys are going behind our backs and forming policies with the ANC, even though you're supposed to be in coalition with all of us little parties. There's also misappropriation of funds, abuse of powers, blah, blah, blah. They said, well, look, we need you to address it, and we need you to get rid of the mayor if you can't address it. And if you're not going to get rid of the mayor, we are. So they had a vote of no confidence. They got rid of the mayor. And then they said, look, we still want to work with the DA, just we don't want that guy in charge. Let's try again. So the DA say, no, screw you. Actually, we're not coming to this coalition talk. So everyone else came, and they formed a government of local unity without the DA. So the DA spins this as like, the Vryheidsfront Plus are siding with the ANC and all of this, right? The reality is that the DA, and then their caucus leader comes up and says, okay, in exchange for this, we are going to kick you out of every municipality, every hung municipality in the province. You are our enemies now. So there's like this long protracted war that goes on. And some of the interesting things that happened included the fact that, so in Swellendam, they had a coalition where it was one Vryheidsfront Plus seat that made up the balance and allowed them to govern. That was Johan, not de Villiers, van Schalkwyk. Johan van Schalkwyk. And Johan van Schalkwyk is very straight up and down, very clean cut, doesn't tolerate corruption, all that. And what he's done is he insisted that the DA allow the financial oversight to be run by the ANC, which sounds funny, but the chair of that little oversight committee is always a member of the opposition. So if you got one party in, you give the chair of that to the opposite party. It's just standard operating procedure. We're not the ANC. We don't do this sort of stupid nonsense. So but the DA howled in indignation when he insisted that. Well, this starts the problem. And what they do is they contact, after this, there's a couple of other disputes as well, right? But they go, high-ranking members of the DA organized a massive bribe for an ANC councillor, except that they picked.
Is that the one of 2 million rand?
Right, it was 2 million rand. Some of the other things that they included there were like placement at Paul Boys High for his kid, and there was like a couple of other things, like a car. Like it was the kind of stuff where you didn't only need to have financial corruption, but you needed to have corrupted other third-party institutions as well in order to deliver on those promises. It was like really, and allegedly Jaco Lont was involved, right? And there's a report on this, and it's big and hairy, but anyway. So before the report comes out, Johan van Schalkwyk gets impatient, and he can't shut up about it. But now the GNU is in place, and Peter Groenewald reaches over the head of Corné Mulder, who's in charge of the Western Cape branch. He hadn't become party leader yet. He reaches over the head of Corné Mulder, and he has Johan van Schalkwyk removed, right, for bringing the party into ill repute. Because the DA have decided to smear him with nebulous charges of racism in the meantime, right? So they get rid of him, and then a couple of days afterwards, the report comes up, but everyone's focused on Johan van Schalkwyk. So then, a couple of months later, the same thing happens in Matsikama, except I can't be sure that the same thing happened in Matsikama. A similar thing happened in Matsikama, where an ANC councillor mysteriously decides to resign, sign up for the DA, and stand for the DA in his own by-election. Now, we don't know why that is, but there's been a few of those recently. So the DA has been starting to play a really kind of messy game in consolidating hung municipalities with seemingly very underhanded tactics. And what happened there is that the public decided they didn't want ANC or DA, and they didn't like this guy, so they voted PA. So it backfires on both of them. But now the DA
what I see happening
there, councillor to cross over to the DA, but then this PA councillor now stabbed the party in the back and shared a vote of no confidence against the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. They have them removed. Now, they've been taken to court for this, and it's been ruled as like an abuse of power and an illegal procedure, but it's still pretty serious. And his removal has resulted in a by-election. They've won the by-election. goes on. It's been fine. The DA is sort of back in charge there, but these kinds of instability are kind of serious. And the difference between the one that happened there in Matsikama, in Vereinsdorp and whatever, and what's happened in Beaufort West is that Beaufort West's betrayal happened with a DA stalwart who's been part of the party for 20 years and served in parliament. He betrayed them there. I don't know why. Might be financial, might be a personal grudge, might be that he just got desperate and decided that, well, screw it, you guys don't want to talk to me, let's do the ANC. I'll have to contact these people more in the coming week, but in order to figure out the closer details. But what's been going on is very interesting. I just think this kind of skullduggery shows that something's going wrong with the party at the local level that needs further attention.
So that could be the case. My gut thought. The first thing I think about when I hear that is that the demographics in the Cape are clearly changing. I've got family in Plet, and they've been there for decades, a long time. And there was a lot more stability there 20 years ago, a lot more stability. But it's a lot more unstable there politically. And I was speaking to my cousin about 6 months back, and there's things that have been going on there. Now, if I compare that to where I am, I'm in a very strong DA area. I mean, there's no contest here at all. And it's because the demographics of the area where I live in is very different to the demographics in some of those areas. Here, it is predominantly old Anglos. I literally live in like an old age home. They're all old people. 60, 70, 80, 90. And so they all vote for the DA. And I was at a community yesterday morning. I went to the local sort of market area because the brownies were selling baked goods, and my son does Cubs. And so we went there to go support. And I get chatting to the old people. There's all old people, all old Anglos and Afrikaners, all of them old. There's like, 6 or 7 young kids, but basically just old people. And I get chatting to some lady there, and she is your like typical sort of old DA voter. And so in my ward, there's no contest, and it's very stable. You don't have any of this because it is DA. And in fact, they don't canvass in the 1 or 2 areas that would not vote for them. Yeah. So they don't want to upset other.
It stimulates opposition turnout. So it's like calculated voter apathy in certain demographic areas.
But out in those areas that you're talking about, there's a stronger Freedom Front presence. You've obviously got ANC, EFF, and DA. So you've got 4 groups. So what that tells me is that the Cape is changing. That's what that tells me. And so there's greater and greater instability. And the current I've got a contact within the that free bursaries. What's it called? NSFAS. Am I saying right? NSFAS?
NSFAS.
That. Yeah. I've got a contact in there, and she dishes out bursaries in a particular area here in the Cape. And she told me that the last 2 years, she's seen an exponential increase in basically people being stuck on buses from various other places in the country. I won't mention where, and just sent in. So young students get put on buses by their parents and get sent here, and she has to now take them in. And she's seen 2 years that there's been an exponential increase of these young 18-year-old kids.
So they have no plan for residence, nothing like that, and they're just they have problems. They have financing problems as well that go besides that. I mean, it's bananas. But I had a look at
they get like promised free housing here.
But I looked at Stats SA's latest figures on interprovincial migration, and we've got almost exactly a quarter of the population are born outside of the province. And I mean, the proportion of that comes from outside the country is kind of small, because like immigrants are 370,000. In migration from other provinces is 1,600,000. So those are the people who are not born here. But I mean, the biggest corridor, it's Eastern Cape to Western Cape is the second biggest interprovincial migration corridor in the country. The biggest being Limpopo to Gauteng, right?
Mm.
What's interesting is that the Western Cape to Eastern Cape is about half the size, and it's up there on the list. So you've got a lot of to and fro here. What's also interesting is how big the flows from Gauteng have been, because you have the proportion of interprovincial migrants as a whole. You got about 8% from of all interprovincial migration in the country is Eastern Cape to Western Cape, and but from Gauteng to the Western Cape, it's about 6.5%. So I think what we're seeing is there's a lot of also migration from Gauteng, from minorities who are leaving for better middle class jobs and infrastructure. Sure. And so it's not entirely one way, but one is certainly bigger than the other. And
yes. And that's destabilizing things.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I recently did a thing, and I have, let me see if I can open this up, because I wasn't intending to show this, but I have been working, this is one of the things I've been working on this week. Now, I'm going to have to share my screen.
Go for it.
Now, let's see, where are we? So what I did is I made some data maps. So it's very difficult. Now, Excel is a bit of a bastard, I'm afraid. So making these data maps is actually really difficult, because the 3D map function doesn't allow you to export, and it's the only one that you can use for making these custom maps with KML data. So the only one where I can sort of, the reason that these are so low res, so this one's from 2001. You can see most of the concentration is there in Cape Town, and then you've got your Droog Karoo districts are very low, but then they've got small population anyway. So the 2011 districts look like this, 2001. So now, the 2001-2011, you've got municipal and suburban level data. I don't have that data for 22. Unfortunately, with 22, I've only got district level data, not municipal level data, so it makes it more difficult. But you can sort of see where the population clusters. So it's very clear that the former Ikapa area in Cape Town is still where black people concentrate, and the differentiation between the various races geographically is still fairly stark. But the difference between 2001 and 2011 is huge. You can see that, like 2001, 2020, and 2011. The growth in Khayelitsha is absolutely stratospheric. And I mean, even in Cape Town itself, you've gone from negligible black population to about a third, somewhere between a quarter and a third. And you can also see there's a growth in the garden route. So in the garden route there in 2001, it's negligible, maybe a quarter, but it's growing rapidly over there. And 2022, you're seeing the concentration get up quite high. So it's nearly half black. Cape Town is now.
And it would be interesting to overlay voting like where people like which
Well, we know what
difference
the
in voting.
The thing is, we know where the balance is. So we've got about three quarters of the colored, somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the colored population vote DA. About 80 to 85% of the black population vote ANC. But if you get rid of KwaZulu-Natal, it's up to 90 to 95%. So it's 90 to 95% of the black population vote for black nationalist parties. And then you've got the if I can share the, I don't need to share it. I can just sort of say it. The vote share of black nationalist parties in the Western Cape has been on a downward trend for like 10, 15 years. So they're now down to about 25% of the vote of the vote. And that's due to voter apathy. It's not due to people crossing over. So you've got this dominance, a very fragile dominance of minoritarian parties. And a lot of the balance is made up by these very small parties. So you've got about 10% of the vote goes to colored identity parties. That's good. Colored Congress and Patriotic Alliance. And then you've got like a little bit for ACDP, a little bit for Aldramar, a little bit for Vryheidsfront Plus, and then a whole bunch of these other tiny things. And I think the biggest trend actually is what I call localist parties. So you've got a party that's like this, and Cedarburg this, and and you got a lot of those, and they come up everywhere. And then they'll take 1 seat or 2 seats, and then they'll broker fragile coalitions at the local level that flip-flop. Knysna is very vulnerable due to this. So you have, yeah, I think it's sort of, it's a big problem, because eventually, because the idea that this is going to remain the case forever.
Sorry, I'm just going to put on my charger quick. Just keep talking.
Yeah, go on. No, because what I was going to say is that the general feeling is that this is going to go on forever. Like, black people are going to stay away from the ballot box, and maybe one day they'll decide to switch to the DA. I don't believe that's going to happen. Now, part of the reason is that in the Cape, we've seen a similar thing happen before, about 150 years ago. So we had an Afrikaner majority since the dawn of representative democracy in the Cape in 1857. And what happened is, for the first 20, 25 years, Afrikaners didn't show up to the ballot box. It was always difficult to show up. The commutes were huge. And there was no reason to vote. Everything, the government's control over local affairs and even national affairs was negligible. You barely knew the government existed, right? You only called on them if there was a serious local security issue, right? So for the main part, people didn't show up. What happened is that the British made a concerted effort from the mid 1860s onwards to try and unify the whole of Southern Africa under their control. And this triggered a response from I'm not sure where, but this triggered a response from Afrikaner nationalists. And so you had Onze Jan Hofmeyer, who started the Taalbeweging. He launches what's a party called the Afrikaner Bond. And the Afrikaner Bond starts taking over. The Afrikaner Bond starts taking over the ballot. And at the same time, the response to this is that the Anglos in the eastern provinces centered around Grahamstown, which was actually more economically active and wealthy than Cape Town, largely due to the wool industry. They tried to push for Eastern Cape independence because they wanted to be made a crown colony. They didn't want to be. They didn't want what was called responsible government. They wanted the crown to control them. They wanted to suppress Afrikaner control. But it was too late. I mean, once the Afrikaners joined, they were the electoral majority, and there was the Fabian socialists under the Schreiner family started what's known as the South African Party in 1896. and they sold themselves as being against South African unification, but the name is sort of a betrayal, and they pushed for unitary government the second that the war was over. So they didn't even want sort of a federalized system. They pushed in the exact opposite direction, and they absorbed a lot of the Afrikaner parties because Jan Smuts was in charge, and he was a war hero. And they only hit problems because they weren't sufficiently accommodating to Afrikaner language problems. So these kind of populist, these dormant populist constituencies, these can become problems. So stemming the tide is actually kind of essential. Now, it doesn't mean that these things are not inevitable. I think one of the things that people don't realize, because I have a look at this in the during the mid-century in South Africa, you see a huge amount of urbanization, and so a lot of people point to these because they don't look at district level breakdowns of the demographics, and they look at that consistent 3% growth in black urbanization annually, and they say, okay, well, this shows that the internal. The matter is that the urbanization was concentrated in the interior boundaries of the Bantustans, because then they can have an easy commute in and out. This is why when you look at Buffalo City, now Buffalo City is a union of Bisho, which was in the old Bantustan, and then right across the border you have King Williamstown and East London, and these have been unified into Buffalo City. And they're right next to each other for a reason. I mean, Bisho grew from very little into a fairly huge conurbation precisely because of the short commuting distance. Now, this could have been easily prevented if the Western Cape had actually a fairly serious policy for combating land invasions. And if they did, they would also have a much lower unemployment rate, because people coming over here who don't necessarily have jobs available for them would not be able to find a foothold. They'd have to be sent home. And having a decent policy around this, where if you come here, you do a land invasion, we remove you, but sorry, you're going to have to go back and live with your mother again. Here's a bus ticket. Sorry. This would have slowed down this an enormous amount, but the DA were not interested in this. In 2006, they partnered with the German government and with UCT to push a program for incentivizing land invasions by handing out, title deeds, free utility connections, and so on. And what this has meant is that they've accelerated this process enormously, and it's no good. And the thing is, it's well within their power to institute an actually serious anti-land invasion policy. One of the things that you'll notice is how big those numbers are, because you've got, I think it's something like 15% live in the Western Cape, live in informal settlements. And when you're looking at the fact that 25% are not born inside the province, you're looking at probably the majority of the black population that has come from outside in the past 15 to 20 years are living in informal settlements, in one respect or another, whether they've been upgraded or not. So this has actually been an easy problem to solve that they've refused to solve. And if they go on long enough, the Western Cape becomes like the rest of the country. And people, if you look at the rest of the country, you see the ANC declining, but those votes are going to MK and EFF, and to a lesser extent the IFP. So the DA are not going to be able to control this, and to the extent the DA do get control, they are not being able to institute meaningful change where they govern. In Umgeni, for example, if you speak to most people there, the change isn't massive. It isn't notable. And so I think that, and after all, the victories in Umgeni is driven entirely by voter turnout. You've got 23% of the population are white, right? And they have, they over-index the ballot box by 67%. So you get this sort of hairline majority where they represent, I think, 48% of the electorate, and then you add that 5% ish of the black population who vote DA, and then they push over that 50% mark. But if you look at what happened in the national elections at the local level down there in Ngeni, all of those gains made by the DA have gone to the MK, and all of the ANC wards went to the MK as well. So, yeah, scary business.
No, sure. No, sure. I think, I mean, not to at all pull away from what you've said, because I think
by all means
those
pull
are all
away.
valid. Those are all valid points, but I guess perhaps it's more the philosophical side of me, where obviously data and stats and all that is important, but something that flows alongside this, and I think underpins a lot of our success, is the story we tell ourselves. Okay, so if we tell ourselves the stories, I'm the eternal victim because of the evil things my ancestors did, and woe is me, I should stop having children because I'm going to destroy the planet because there'll be too many children, all this kind of stuff, which I actually know people here in the Cape who won't have children because they actually don't. They generally have said, we don't want to destroy the planet more, so we're not going to have children. So it's the story they tell themselves. I have this other friend, and
if they really believe that, then they should be volunteering for the Treatment Action Campaign and going around distributing contraceptives.
She's actually a doctor, and she's involved with what. So I mean, it's basically.
There you go. In that case, it is a consistent value system, and
no, it is. But it's a terrible one. It's an absolute terrible one. And I've got this other friend. He said to me that he wishes more people had died during COVID, because he thinks that humans are a plague on this earth. Okay. Now, this might sound crazy to you, but there are a lot of people that genuinely think that. It's the story they tell themselves. So I think what is so important in what we're doing is to tell ourselves a truthful story, that actually our ancestors are not all these evil, terrible people, and that we actually have a lot to be proud of. What our ancestors, the things they built, what they created. Obviously, there was conflict, and there were problems, and there were bad things. But to tell ourselves a truthful story, and one that promotes the development of civic organizations, ones that promotes the development of families and having children and wanting to settle down and stay here and actually build something. But if we're constantly telling ourselves, I must feel guilty all the time because of the apartheid or because of colonization, that's going to constantly undermine us.
I think what it does is it undermines confidence in any form of progress, because when you, psychologically speaking, if you have this kind of despair about the human condition, it does bleed
or even about our particular heritage.
But I do wonder if it's not. I do wonder if it's not just the effect of absorbing ambient propaganda about various issues. I mean, a lot of the sort of scare value stuff that drives global governance, particularly CO2 emissions and so on. There's a kind of absolutism to it, and there's a kind of esoteric power that it has, where you stop seeing the world in terms of there's that old distinction between conservationism and environmentalism, where in conservationism you're saying, well, we've got to maintain this garden so that we can still eat from it, and so that it's beautiful and we can share it with one another. And then the environmentalist position is the garden becomes the protagonist, and we forget that it's a garden, not and it's there for us to enjoy. and to look after, and instead we sort of say, well, let's remove ourselves from the equation, and it turns into this weird anti-life suicidal thing.
Exactly.
I don't know if it can really be pinned down to any one thing or another entirely, because there's always an odd psychological component to why people pick one belief system or another. I mean, it's not like people sit and rationally think through this stuff. I mean, there's a very weird sort of side comment. There's this fairly smart advisor to the president at the moment, who, you know, policing and so on. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I was reading an interview with him a couple of years ago, where he was saying that he was boasting that, I come from an old Anglo-American mining family, and, you know, I'm proud that I refuse to partake in the military cadets because I'm not going to engage in this war. And I sort of thought to myself, well, look, I can understand not being I can understand being afraid of joining up to the front line, but, you know, the border war wasn't an unjust war. It was a war against a very legitimate threat. The Angolan army was being commanded, supplied, and coordinated by the Soviet Union's officers, and there was also, you know, Cuban invaders as well. The idea that defending yourself against trans-border assaults from an international invasion force is a bad idea is like, you kind of have to be a bit bananas to think that. But it's a lot of comforting thing where you say, I'm on the side of the ANC. I'm the good guy. You know, it's very simplistic vision.
The thing is, though, that Rob is a lot of people think that. A lot more people think like that than perhaps we give them credit. I talk to random people in the shops and so forth, and the thing people always go back to is, I didn't support the apartheid. It's like a moral. It becomes like a moral thing where they are constantly trying to moralize everything, moralize history, and they forget that there were much bigger things happening, and like that they themselves are tied into a particular story that goes back hundreds of years, you know, back to the 1500s.
No, I mean, I think what you're saying in broad strokes is very good, and I want to use this as a little segue, because people's so historical memory, even of the recent past, tends to cloud their judgment a little bit. And for my money, I think, you know, when I look at some of the problems that we're dealing with in Cape Town, there's a tendency to forget exactly what has, you know, what has transpired in the budget. Because at the moment, you know, we're talking about the rates, right? And that's the big dispute. It's a dispute in the court at the moment. You've got the Cape Independence Party, AFRI Forum, the Good Party, a whole bunch of people, the you know, property owners, local ratepayers organizations. Everyone's joining the battle. There's no one on the city side because they are in the wrong. They refuse, and Jordan Hill-Lewis has said they refuse to ask for more money from the national government, right? Because that money needs to be spent in Buffalo City and elsewhere, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is his official position. And it gets worse than that, because this week, the provincial government and the city have both shared their own employees now constitute 42% of the customs enforcement agents and the immigration agents at the airport. So now we're further subsidizing the national government from our own ratepayers. I mean, it's bloody insane. And there's this little excerpt that I've brought up here. This is Councillor Haskins of the ACDP. Now, he's been around in the city council for a very long time, and he talks now about this. I think is from the June council meeting, and it was very interesting because the 4 billion rand shortfall in the budget that we got at the moment. I mean, one of the ways that they're plugging this is they're selling off the convention center. So the city has a 72% stake, and they're selling it off for 885 million rand. So they're going to plug out, they're going to bring that sort of budget shortfall down to 3.5 by burning the furniture. The stupidity of all of this stuff. I mean, Jordan Hill-Lewis is an incredibly short-sighted man. And after this, what I wanted to do before we clock off is I want to point out some of his town planning stuff. And we talk about because it's recently including District 6, but we'll talk about that now.
No matter what words one puts to describe it in different ways from last time, the reality is that this is still customer debt being written off as irrecoverable. That's what we're talking about here. So the STB's got three concerns. Firstly, it's been said that this is a once-off debt, right? I think I've heard that 4 times in my time as council. This is another before.
Yeah, he said there that 4 times. He's heard it 4 times. Rob, I can't hear you. Rob, there's no sound.
The report.
Oh, sorry. Is there no?
Page 11 started.
Beg your pardon. When I muted my mic, did I mute the video audio as well?
Yeah. So, but we did hear that 4 times. This council has heard that.
Yeah. They're writing off billions in debt. But I mean, he goes back and he's like, it's interesting.
This is another one. It's happened before. Firstly, secondly, it's never just a few million rand here and there. It's always a few billion rand. Let's be aware of that. And thirdly, it's never in the past reduced or improved the culture of payment in the city. It's never done that, and it never will in the future. So this is a debt write-off now. We had one in 2022 after COVID, 2021, 2022, right? That didn't have much effect, did it? Because if you look on page 11 of the report, you will see that page 11 started off with 6.9 billion in debt. After this, that once off, we were still at 6.9 billion. And we've now grown to 9.3 billion. So what we believe this is doing is this is just going to drop it back to 6. Right? This is just to try and keep the debt as low as possible. The first massive debt write-off that I can recall was during the term of the city's first coalition government, when Helen Zille was the bank. Then the debt write-off was close to 5 billion rand. I was sitting where Alderman is sitting now, and I was told that this is the first big one, and it won't happen again. So it happened again during Manta Lowell's time. Of course, they also crude about how caring and sensitive we are. It happened again in 2018, forgetting that it's happened several times before. In 2006, whenever it was in that period, the 8-9, then we blamed it on the ANC, who had been governing before. And it was easy to do that because their debt collection policy was very good, careless, and so it was easy to blame it on the previous government. Now you can't, because it's the same government. Blaming it on itself is not possible. So, I said earlier that outstanding debt is growing. The city always pats itself on the back, always packages itself as caring, because it seems to us as the ACDP that the city has a playbook that it follows in this regard. And it starts always with what we've just done in the previous meeting, which is to set the budget at such an unaffordable rate In fact, what I did was, in looking at this, I pulled out a 2018 speech of mine where I said the same thing as I'm saying now. And it doesn't look like it. In other words, it looks like what we're dealing with is a playbook that just runs in a cycle. We're now at the cycle of writing off. But the cycle starts when the city charges unaffordable rates for a massive and unaffordable budget. That's step number one. As a result of that, customer debt increases to unaffordable levels. As a result of that, you can see in the budget and the financial management report every year that the city spends millions of rands debt collecting, paying lawyers to harass people who want to pay but they can't, so that they get harassed at work, at home, during late night hours. They're struggling, they're tormented, they're vulnerable customers. And what's happening is the city is using ratepayers' money to pay the lawyers and the debt collectors to collect the debt from the ratepayers. That's what's happening. This is not somebody else's money. It's ratepayers' money that is used to collect their debt against them. So what we predict as the ACDP is that this is the once-off, the latest, most recent once-off debt write-off. And in 2029, we'll have another one. And by then, the debt will probably be at about 9-10 billion, and then it'll drop back to about 6 billion, because we've seen it before. So what we really need to do as the city is change the way we do this. We need to cut our suit according to the size of the cloth that we've got. The size of the cloth is determined by what is affordable for ratepayers to pay. In other words, we package our expenditure according to what ratepayers can give us to spend in Chile. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, but you can see what the problem is. And it's not just them. I mean, you see it in Drakenstein, you see it everywhere, right? They write off huge chunks of debt every single year. And the rates keep going up, and we had a 66% increase over here. And like, okay, fair enough. Property rates have increased, and the previous evaluation was slightly undervalued. But they don't have to charge that much. They can just not pay, spend exorbitant amounts of money on stupid nonsense. And some of it is stupid nonsense. I mean, in my own municipality is, the waste to energy plant. That's, what is it, 1.2 billion rand? I mean, I know some of that's being covered by the national government in a grant because they're very, very eager to maintain this relationship with the foreign supplier. And they destroyed local waste collection by preventing any waste being taken out of the municipality so that they'd have the basic resources to feed into this waste to energy plant. But I mean, the consequences have been bloody dire, and now they're spending 14 million rand every year just cleaning up fly tipping. Like the stupid nonsense that goes on in DA municipalities. Because the ANC does absolutely nothing and steals everything, we think, well, okay, the DA is better because they govern badly, but at least they govern. Yeah. I think like, this standard is absurd.
I tried to convince. I tried to speak to people about this, and that's the exact argument that always comes up. Is, well, it's better than the alternative. Well, it's better than the alternative, but the problem is that. As I've said, it's very clear that South Africa is, in all sense and purposes, dead, because the mines and ports are gone, and the large boomer generation and the Gen Z are going to be out in 10 years, 15 years, and once they're gone, this whole project is over, and so instead of just waiting for that time. What would be so much better is to start to move towards something else now, so that we can try to preserve something.
Yeah, but I mean that requires giving up on a lot of things, and it also requires demanding things as well. I mean, I look at Jordan Hill-Lewis is now in negotiations with Farouz Gachalia, the acting police commissioner, for the devolution of police powers, but he insists the unitary form of the police is sacrosanct. With Becky Cele and with Senson Kunu and all of these guys, where he asked for more police powers, but the negotiations after the GNU, he actually ended up giving up powers, because what he did is he subordinated the Metro Police under SAP's command. So without getting any increased powers in exchange. So this is a continual problem. Is we just end up giving away resources to the national government, powers and control, and telling people that this is devolution. But what it is it's harmonization. And I don't understand how people swallow this, don't see where it's going. It's very clear to me that the DA has a very, very clear aim of harmonizing themselves with the ANC and forming this new center.
I think so many people are still fixated on South Africanism, and you see with the Springboks, people are, it's their thing. It's not my thing because I can see what it is and what it's doing and where it's going. But so many people are still going on and on about the Springboks. The Springboks are even the Springboks. Like, it looks like there's something there, but like, you know, what is really going on?
It's just sports. It's just sports. It's fun and games, and yes, we can have fun together and we can socialize together. But when it comes to the big, deep questions, you know, the divide remains. There's no meaningful black opposition to racial discrimination. There's no meaningful black opposition to budget profligacy, and there's no, and you know, the white elites are not in opposition to central economic planning. They're not in opposition to BEE with any sort of meaningful strength. Like, they're against it in principle, but in practice, they don't really do much about it. I mean, again, for the millionth time, I could bring up the fact that, you know, the DA since 2022, after Sakaliga won that case, they won a case against the government regarding procurement, the Procurement Act, and the ruling from Judge Zondo actually said that because of what is and isn't provided in the Constitution, the mandate to provide value for money exceeds the strength of the mandate to comply with BEE quotas, which means that for procurement at a municipal and provincial level, the DA could actually say, no, we're going to prioritize value for money because that's actually constitutionally mandated, whereas the BEE stuff isn't. So we're not going to run a BEE based supply chain, but instead they do. They follow to the letter of the law, and they strengthen it by increasing the mandate towards gender equality and disability. And for my money, I look at this and I kind of go, well, they're mental. Why are they doing this? Well, it's because they believe in the system and they hate the fact that their voters don't. Because the voters want change. And, you know, we all think, you know, if only we had like a liberalized economy and non-racialism, we'd get on. But it's like, yeah, but you don't have that. You don't have a liberalized economy. You can't get one, right? You can't abolish racial discrimination because the section of the population who thinks that it's vital to abolish does not reach a third of the electorate. And that is just an insuperable boundary. And I would say it wasn't if this is 20 years ago. But, you know, we've seen no movement in public sentiment on these questions since 1994. Not one iota.
Yeah. And so it's going to take people to make radical stances. And, people need to do things and not be afraid to do them, and to be bold and courageous, and to even sacrifice.
But I think also no. But I mean, look, you know, there's stuff that they can, you know, we can do in terms of getting involved and putting pressure on, you know, through the civic sector. But let's just look at the elections, because that's the lowest effort contribution anyone can make. So you go to elections, and then you get there, and you're afraid the DA is going to be voted out. And I'm saying, look, guys, we're in a representative democracy. If you're voting at a national election at the provincial level, you don't have to vote DA. Vote that's taken up by minoritarian parties is not going to change.
Sure.
55 and 60%. It's going to stay there. So you need to really worry about that is kind of silly. But by shifting which party shares that block, you put pressure on the DA to do the right thing.
Yeah.
How black nationalists have been pushing Ramaphosa's timetable for radical economic transformation up, because they're moving from the ANC to the EFF to the MK, and this is putting pressure on. And this is what gives change, is you've got to understand there are two electoral systems running side by side, which are completely different, and no one crosses that line, or at least no one. No, some people do, but it's not a lot. Meaningfully, if you want change, you have to shift the balance within your voting bloc, because your buddies, the rest of your white neighbors are not voting ANC. They're voting, DA, a little bit of Vryheidsfront Plus maybe. So it's going to be a no-brainer to understand representative democracy at a local level. I get it. If there's a split seat, if there's a danger that you're going to lose the seat to the ANC, I understand that fear. I do understand that fear. Okay, but I'm still not going to vote DA myself, because frankly they do need fire. They need fire under their backside, and nothing is going to change until they get it. So it's a hard game. It's a hard game, and it's a struggle, because there's not a lot of time left on the clock before things really start coming apart. I mean, look, there's some good things in the news this week as well. I need to
hit. Sorry, dude. Sorry, man. I need to bounce.
Same. Yeah, that's why I've got to wrap it up. I've got like 2 to 5 minutes to wrap this up. But no, I mean, look, there are a couple of things in sort of the trade sector that I want to mention, just that actually are good. So not good, but at least shows the signs that someone's trying something. So, we're introducing 10% steel tariffs to stop China from displacing local production. Okay. Now, this is in lieu of actually fixing chronic problems that are chasing ArcelorMittal away, but it's better than nothing. And Transnet's also privatizing their services. So they're going to have 11 private train operators. And this is good because, you've had like Cuba Iron Ore and all of that have been struggling with they've been struggling with a lot of problems. They've had to stockpile stuff at Saldanha because every quarter there's like 2 to 3 rail failures along the session line. This is tremendously bad, and they've been begging to be let on to fix this stuff for a long time. But the biggest news I think that is positive is the Starlink stuff, because if we manage to get the concessions that Starlink is offering, juice, yeah. I think, look, this is the silver lining here, is that if Papa, yeah, if we get the concessions that we're looking for from the government, if Starlink gets them, and you get to make sort of investment substitutions instead of BEE, the meaningful change that'll be is that there's something called the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, and you're going to get local companies who are going to be able to sue the government on the basis of the PAJA Act, and that might mean the end of BEE. But the negotiations aren't over, so this is something to keep an eye on. And if something decisive occurs, we might actually see a little bit of a turnaround. But it's only going to be a partial one, and some of the deeper problems are not yet resolved. So, eyes on the prize, I guess. Okay. Well, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to spend time with this little one. Yeah. Okay. Well, bye-bye, everybody. Bye. Bye.